Hey guys, Ryan here at Taking Credits, and today we're going to look at how to get your photos dark and moody, taking them from here to here. Let's dive in. Alright, so first we're going to flip to some examples, dark and moody photos. No one exemplifies this better in my mind than Firsty. Dylan First, a photographer based up in Bellingham. He has some gorgeous work. You can check it out on Instagram. Now, what makes for dark and moody photos? Well, first off, they're dark. Second off, they feel moody. What makes a photo feel moody? Well, a lot of it comes down to the lighting. So that's the first thing that we're actually going to look at. If you look at Dylan's photos, every single one of them is filled with fog or clouds, or it's naturally dark. It's close to nighttime, or it's dusk, or it's dawn. And again, we've got tons of cloud cover, tons of natural blues in the image to give it that cold, kind of dark, moody look and feel. We've really got a monochromatic color scheme, so there isn't anything super saturated in these photos. It feels desaturated when you look at it because it's a dark and moody day that he shot these photos on. You'll notice the one thing that's absent. With the exception of this photo here, and perhaps this one, every single photo so far has been shot on a cloudy day. You don't see anything with bright sun and super bright saturated colors. And the photos that do have bright saturated colors, such as this guy or this one, he doesn't pull off the look as well. I wouldn't call this photo dark and moody anymore. I would just call it maybe a nice photo, but it was taken at the middle of the day when the lighting was harsh. It doesn't have the same effect. So now let's pop over to something like Travel Awesome. Travel Awesome is the opposite of dark and moody. And you'll see that the opposite of dark and moody is, well, it's shot bright sun. Super saturated colors. Super green, super blues. You get my drift. We've got really bright saturated reds here. Now, a lot of these photos are still shot when the light was great. They aren't shot most of the time at like high noon when we've got really harsh shadows. However, some of them are. And for the most part, we're looking at very bright, direct sunlight, whereas the dark and moody look is best accomplished through having super soft, gorgeous, soft light, basically from cloud cover or from it being around sunset or sunrise when the dawn is just starting to come and the light is super soft. The angle of the sun is lower in the sky. And now this might seem like, okay, just come on, show me how to edit my photos so they have that dark and moody look. The important thing here is to show you that Dylan First, he only gets his look by shooting it right in camera. It's dark and moody before he ever takes it into Lightroom or Photoshop. Whereas Travel Awesome, these photos, if I wanted to, I could not make this photo look dark and moody like Dylan First photos, simply because it was taken in the middle of the day in a tropical beach with saturated colors, bright sun. Only so much you can do. So now let's hop over into Lightroom and show you what you can do to make your photos darker and moodier, even if they weren't necessarily taken at the perfect time with the perfect cloud cover, that sort of thing. Okay, so here's our example photo of a dark and moody shot that has potential. We've got really soft light. You look at the shadows under the trees, for example. We don't have very harsh shadows. Now we look at our subject. Yes, his face is pretty bright, but we don't have any harsh shadows, no bags under the eyes. The sky is bright. It's definitely shot not at an ideal time. This photo would actually be better if it was shot closer to sunset or sunrise when the light was softer so that the sky wasn't quite so bright. But because we're in this dense forest, we have really soft, natural light, and we can get this kind of a look with only a few clicks, whether that's just by lowering the contrast. We'll do it manually really quick here. Maybe raise the shadows up a little bit, do a tone curve, bada bing, bada boom. And I actually did a tutorial on this. We're just going to desaturate some of these yellows, greens, and you can check out that tutorial if this is interesting to you. We're going to warm up the yellows a little bit here, drop the exposure down because we want it to be dark, and now maybe just add a little bit of dehaze. And there's a lot of different ways to get that dark and moody look. You can, for instance, just go to our presets. We do have a Moody Vibes preset pack. We'll reset this, and you could, with one click, if the photo has the right characteristics, it'll look pretty good out of the gate with these presets applied. Now, obviously, these are a little extreme with this photo. Why? Because this photo still isn't that soft of light. If we had something that was softer, for instance, we'll jump over here. This photo was taken very overcast sky. Here's yours truly, not looking very good, but whatever. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm willing to embarrass myself. And these presets work pretty great out of the gate. I can just dial things back, so the skin, maybe take my contrast down a little bit, and I do not like the colors in that. There we go. Try something like that. Take my blacks up a little bit. Because dark and moody doesn't necessarily mean contrasty. It just means dark. And soft light is normally, well, soft. You're not going to get harsh shadows. So we can dial back the contrast, lower the exposure, and get a dark and kind of moody look happening pretty quick. But how do you do that if your shot was taken like this, where you've got some bright sunlight on your subject? Or like this guy, where we've got a really bright sky? Well, I'm going to show you a few things you can do, and a few things that, well, there's limitations. No matter what you do, if your photo is not naturally dark and moody, it's only going to go so far. But let me show you what you can do, all right? First things first. Let me show you what it looks like just applying the presets. We're kind of dropping the saturation down and adding a little bit of a fade. Things look moodier and darker, but obviously we've still got a bright blue sky to contend with here. It's going to, if we want moody, we kind of have to fight the saturated blue happy sky. So I'm going to grab my saturation in the blues, pull it back. I'm going to darken things down, kind of like this. And that is kind of as dark and moody as I could get that shot. Really, there's not a whole lot else I could do other than come back and shoot this photo when the sky is not bright blue and the sun is right there in the sky. Let me move on to something like this, where we don't have direct blue sky. Then we have some more options. So the first thing that I'm going to do to save some time is just go to my Signature Edits Genesis pack, show you a few presets, and they're all looking pretty harsh. Why is that? Because the light is actually pretty harsh on our subject. So we can apply one of these presets, but we're going to have to take our contrast down right away, maybe take our blacks up and take our exposure down. Great. Now we can grab our temperature. I kind of like doing the auto. Occasionally, Lightroom's terrible at guessing, but once in a while is not a big issue. We can just correct it. So that's looking closer. It's definitely not what I would necessarily call dark and moody. Let me show you a few things that can add that. First is our tone curve. So we can actually add a fade in the tone curve, and that's naturally going to make the image feel kind of moodier and vibier by giving that film look. So we're going to grab this, and you can actually just double click on the farthest left little dot, and that will give you a tone curve. You can slide up, and you can see basically there are no true blacks in the image. As I take it up, it's just dark gray in here rather than true black. So I'm not going to do that far, but you can grab it and maybe take it to there. So here's without the tone curve. Actually, here's a better way. That's without, and there's with that slight fade applied. And another thing you can do is just add some greens in the shadows. I find adding a little bit of green in the shadow can go a long way to making it feel more moody. Same with reds. So we're going to do that. And then I'm going to go to my reds. I'm going to do the same thing. Just double click on this little guy. Perfect. So if I make a virtual copy here and show you, here's the preset straight out of the gate. And here's with our changes applied. It's definitely less contrasty, a little bit moodier perhaps once we drop the exposure. And what I would do, again, is maybe take this background down. We'll take it slightly darker. Grab a radial filter and make our subject just a little bit brighter with some exposure like that. Invert it by pressing the quotation marks. That'll actually change which section of the image is being brightened or darkened, so you can see. Great. And then I can get away with lowering it even more. Here's our image before, and here's our image after. You can see the fade makes a big difference. Dropping the exposure makes a big difference. Another thing we can do is take the saturation out. Desaturated is generally what happens when you have softer, more moodier light. So we're going to take the saturation, especially in our blue sky, down. And wow, you can see what a big difference that made. Blue sky means a happy, kind of bright day, and it's hard. Even if it's dark and we've lowered the exposure, you can still see the blue, and your eye is like, something's not right about this. Whereas if we take the blues down, it's more desaturated, it already feels darker and moodier. Here's the original image. Here's the dark and moody edit. Lastly, what you can do, actually there's a couple things, not just lastly. Split toning can be a great way to add color to an image, or at least add a cohesive color. So what I mean by that is, let's take this to the max. I can add one color across my image, which sort of, if we look at our Dylan First example here, he's got blues across his entire image. Now this is mostly because in the image itself, there is a lot of blue and there really isn't much of another color. That's how he gets it. I'll never get it to look like that. However, I can kind of add some cohesiveness across the image by adding some blue to everything, highlights, midtones, and shadows. So you can see that's before, that's after. In the shadows, let's say I want to do the exact same thing, just go like add blue in the shadows, add blue in the highlights. Here's before, here's after. Or you can go the opposite way if you want like more of a moody, warm feel. You can maybe add some magentas or add some oranges. Just play around there. So that's one thing you can do to make your images moodier, add some split toning. Again, here's our image before. There's our image after. Great. Sharpening, we won't touch that too much. Noise reduction can sometimes make things look a little bit more dreamlike in quality because it's lowering the overall sharpness of the image. So if you want to, you can apply some noise reduction. I'll take it to the max. Here you can see. This is with all the noise reduction all the way up to a stupid high level. And here is without, if Lightroom will show it up in the preview. So you should be able to see that it's going to soften things very slightly. However, it doesn't look like the preview is showing up. So you can just play with that. And then effects. Grain can definitely make your image feel darker, moodier. I don't know why it is, but grain just feels nostalgic. It feels old, therefore you feel the vibes more. So you can take your grain and go absolutely crazy and make something ridiculous like this. But generally, if I notice it here when it's just a small image, then when I flip to a big image, full screen, etc., it's going to be way too obvious. So I'm just going to take my grain and play with it until I can feel it, but I can't see it. Great. So here's before the grain and after the grain. Again, zoomed in. That's after. Here's before. You can see it really adds a depth and an organic feel to the image. So if we zoom out of here, hello, Lightroom is kind of struggling. Great, if we zoom out and show you the before image and after, there is a long way you can go as long as you don't have direct sun in your actual photo. If you have direct sun, well, it's going to be tough to trick your eye into thinking that it's dark and moody. For instance, if I copy all of these settings and paste it on this photo, yes, it's dark and it's moody-ish, but it's still just, it looks a little weird and unnatural, to be honest. Let's take this, see what we can do. Maybe brighten our man here. Great, stretch that out. So yes, it's gone a long way with those same tips, but at the end of the day, there's not much we can do to get rid of the sky. It's still going to feel just not entirely dark and moody, is all I can say about that. One last thing I could do in this particular image is bring out the texture of the clouds. I think that might make it feel kind of more storm-like in nature. So I could actually go in here to my cloud enhancer brush. And you can make one of these. You don't need to have the preset, but it comes with our preset packs. Is just add some highlights, a little bit of clarity, take the saturation down again to get rid of those blues. And you can see that'll just make it look a little bit more stormy still. And I'm just doing a quick job for the sake of this tutorial, but you could take your time if you want. So here's before, and there's after. Now let's look at another image, and I'm not going to use a preset on this next one. So obviously I could do the same route and start with a preset, but for the sake of our tutorial, we are going to start from scratch, get out of this adjustment brush, go to my basic panel. I'm going to take my contrast down because the first thing I want to do is fake like it's a cloudy day. What happens on a cloudy day? The light is diffused, the shadows are far less harsh, so I'm going to try and just recreate that in Lightroom as much as I can. So this is going to look a little weird until I add a tone curve, but I'm taking my shadows up, take my whites down maybe a little bit. Great. And we're just going to go to the tone curve now. If you don't use the tone curve yet, this is a must-use tool inside of Lightroom. It adds so much dimension and pop to your photos. I'm just doing an S-curve by clicking 3 times in the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights, and just making this basic S shape. That's going to add some contrast to our image. Great. Now I'm going to lower the exposure. And I probably went a little crazy here in the basic panel, so we're just going to dial it back. Great. Warm up my white balance because typically moodier days, they just look warmer. Perfect. Take my blacks down just a little bit. And now we're going to grab the saturation, pull that right back, and move into the tone curve. From there, I'm going to do the same thing as last time, raise my blacks up a little bit, just like that. Just double click here. There we go. Great. So you can see it's kind of got a vintagey vibe happening. Here's before. Here's after. Now we're going to go to our, let's do reds this time. We'll warm up the reds a little bit in the shadows. Something like that. Very slight. And a little bit in green. Same situation. Oh. Did not mean to do that. Double click on this point to get rid of it. Great. So now you can see that there's limitations because this photo was taken on a sunny, bright day. So we're just going to keep working. Go to our HSL here. And then I'm going to start pulling saturation, particularly out of these greens and yellows. Something like that. And the blues to hide that blue sky. Then for my hue, I'm going to take my oranges, warm them up. A little bit. Yellows, warm them up. And there's a million different ways that you could go with this, but I'm just sort of winging it as I go here. Luminance, there's a couple ways to do this. You can try and maybe lessen your contrast by raising some of these things up. For instance, the sky, you could either brighten it up, but that's probably going to go against what we're doing, or you could darken it slightly. So there's before and after our tone curve adjustment, or HSL adjustments. Great. Now I'm going to go down here to our detail, add a little bit of noise reduction, transform, and we can skip past that actually. Lens corrections is what I meant to click. Hit profile corrections and take the vignette off. I want it to correct the profile of the lens, but I don't want it to get rid of the vignette because the vignette kind of actually adds some moodiness to the photo. Then I'm going to go, I keep hitting transform to the effects. We're going to add some grain. Great, and that's pretty big, so we're going to dial that back. Dial the roughness back a little. Okay. And calibration, if you wanted to, you could play with this. Obviously, taking our shadows up towards magenta instantly warms up the image, makes it feel more just warm. And that's kind of something that we find on cloudy, moody days. The images tend to be warm more than anything. They're not cool and bright and saturated, so we want to get away from those things. So this is kind of trial and error, to be totally honest. I'm just playing around here. Blues make the biggest difference, I find, across everything. This is how you get that kind of orange and teal look very easily. Just take your blues and the hues and drag them down. We're going to leave that alone. I can maybe desaturate my greens here a bit. Try the blues as well. There we go, that's getting there. And I'm going to add some contrast back into the image. I can do that a couple of different ways, by trying some dehaze, or by adding some contrast, or by raising my whites up and lowering my blacks. So you can see it's definitely moody, but the image is lacking a certain amount of pop that I would like it to have. So I'm going to slowly just play around here, maybe pull the highlights back, because we still don't want it to be too high contrast of an image. And I'm going to raise the whites just a little bit, raise my contrast just a little. And we're going to do some split toning at the very end. So there's two ways to do it. You could click in your highlights here and just randomly sample around until you find something you like. We're kind of headed in the warmer direction, so we'll just stick with, say, there. And then we'll do the same with the shadows. We could do a two-tone look, so we could do this orange here, and we could also maybe do a blue in the shadows to make it feel colder. Or we could do more of a monochromatic feel, go somewhere in the same area. And I'm going to stick with that just because. Take my saturation down so it's not so strong. You can see the difference there. And here's our before image and after. Before, after. So you can see, I mean, we've still got issues here where it's never going to look dark and moody the way that a photo that naturally is dark and moody is going to allow us to do. So try and get it right in camera where possible. That's going to add a lot. Great. Let's move on to one last photo here. And let's say we're going to edit this one. This photo was taken by Mike Ikdeben. So thanks, Mike, for sending through your photo and your question about how to edit something to look dark and moody on a non-dark and moody day. And I'm going to, for the sake of time here, use our presets, because me winging it is one thing. Using a preset, I kind of get my colors where I want, and I can just adjust the main adjustments for you. So you can see that we've got our West Coast pack here. It looks great. It's definitely a very high contrast look right away. And the reason it's high contrast is because the light is already high contrast. So it's going to bring out what's already there. We've got very, very harsh light on her face, her skin. And although this photo was taken in the trees, we've got some relative shadows. We can also see that based on the angle of the light, we've got raccoon eyes under her face. We've definitely got like an afternoon shoot going on here, a very blue looking sky, saturated green. So we're going to have to be aware of that as we edit. So I'm going to make a copy just so we can compare as we're going. Great, and we're going to go with desaturated 3. You can see it's desaturated the greens. Here's with the greens, there's desaturated. And all that's doing is we've got a tone curve applied. We've got some basic adjustments. We've got some split toning going on. And a lot of the color magic happens here in the HSL panel. We're taking saturation particularly out of the yellows and the greens, a little bit out of the oranges and the reds for her skin. We're just brightening up her skin as well. Okay, so how would I make this dark and moody? Because this isn't really something I would call dark or moody. If I lower the exposure, that's going to go a ways, but obviously we're going to start crushing the blacks and the shadows here. So what I'm going to do first is dial back my contrast, raise my blacks up, and that already is going to just give us the feel of a softer lit day. Darken it down. Great, now I'm going to go over to my tone curve. I'm going to do the same thing as before. Raise up. Double click this and we'll just have a cutoff. So I can add a little bit of a natural fade. Cool, go to my greens. I'm going to do the same thing in the greens here. Just slight natural fade with greens. Perfect. You can see here is the preset as it was, and here's the preset with our adjustments. Great. Go down my split toning. I could either tweak this or I could just add in some warmer tones. That's going to make it feel more like a cloudy day. The shadows right now are blue, so I can maybe take this over to the oranges or the greens if I wanted to. Just play around, and this does depend on your style. Using a reference image can be very helpful. We're going to grab that. Great. And effects. Let's make sure we got some grain. Yes, we do. Noise reduction, add a little bit of that. Then, one thing I can do that I haven't done so far is I'm going to use this beautiful effects brush that we have called Dreamy Dehaze, or actually Brooding Dehaze Darken. All I have to do is select that, and you can see that it's automatically going to take the background and darken everything outside of this radial filter and just declarify it. So you don't have to have this brush. It comes with our pack, and it's just nice to have it, and it's fast and easy to apply. However, you can recreate the same effect just by using these settings here. I'm going to take my feather up so it's not as obvious. And you can see here is without the brush, and here is with it added back in. So it's just adding some darkness around the areas of the image that aren't our subject, and we can fade it in, adjust the amount of the effect simply by pressing this little triangle here and dragging that slider up or down. It'll adjust the intensity, and it just adds a little bit more of that dark and moody feel. So we can jump to our original image here and compare it with our edited dark and moody image. You can see there is a vast amount of difference between the two. You can definitely get that dark and moody feel with images that aren't shot in pure clouds in perfect light. However, your best bet is always going to be getting it right in camera. The closer you can get your edit to look in your camera before you touch Lightroom, the more fun you're going to have in Lightroom and the more wow factor your photos are going to have. So I hope that this tutorial was helpful for you in just seeing the different things you can do to get that dark and moody look and what it takes to get those kind of photos. It's all about great light, it's all about great composition, shooting at the right time of day, and then the different tricks that you can do to make it feel darker and moodier in post. Things like working on your tone curve, desaturating certain colors in the HSL panel, going through adding grain, adding a little bit of a fade, split toning. Those are all different techniques that can just take your edits to the next level, and I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, please hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe, and if you have a question about a future edit or an idea, please send it my way to hello@signatureedits.com. If you're interested in purchasing these presets, you can head to signatureedits.com and just click on the shop button to get started, and yeah, look forward to hearing from you, and until next time, go create something awesome.